All right, moving quickly into week 4, new 24, we are going to do more of grouping. So you should be coming off of new 23.5, which was peeking ahead but looking behind also, into all the ins and outs of how to decide how to factor. And in that, you saw an explanation of the process of factoring. If you did not go watch that, please stop where you are, go back and watch that, because you get 2 examples of grouping there. One where you see the whole thing, and one where you see a little trick that I learned from a teacher a couple years ago that makes it a tad shorter. It's not like, I say trick, but it's a trick rooted in, mathematical reasoning. So go back, watch that one, then come back here and you'll get all the practice that you need and could ever want. Okay, so let's get started, because this one it's a doozy. It's probably one that will be most time consuming because it's a process. So the only way out is through, as we tell our kids sometimes with anything hard. The only way out is through. So you just got to do it. The only way to get better at this is going to be to practice and to learn the process and just to gain that muscle memory on doing it over and over again and learning and anticipating that next step. Because once you learn what that next step is, you'll know it for, the next time you do it. All right. So let's look at some of these. All right, so we actually start with a little bit of a review of not only a equals 1, but a GCF and an a equals 1. So number 1 is just a straight a equals 1. And again, I know that because right here in front of that x squared, which is my a, because if I'm writing ax squared plus bx plus c, I have nothing there. And if I have nothing, it's really a 1. So because of that, I'm simply looking at this number. And when I look at that number, it's a positive. And I gave you another little trick on that other video. And again, that kind of rooted in number sense of if that's a positive, I'm only going to look over here this week. And if you want that explanation, go back to that video. Okay, so 13, 8, 7. There's my 7. It's a positive 7, so I need both of those to be positive. Because a equals 1, I can go straight to my binomials. X, 3, 4, both positive. And I am done. X plus 3, x plus 4. Now for number 2, I have an extra step beforehand. Remember, the question always begs, do you have a GCF? Because this is going to make your life easier. You should always ask yourself this, number 1, because it makes your life easier. But number 2, we talked in the last video about like what your problems look like in terms of picking a way to factor or choosing a way to factor. Looking at this one, I could choose this to factor, but then your first question to me should be like, do we know how to factor this? Because it's a third, it's not a second when you're talking about the exponent. But if you look across, every term has an x, which is a problem, because if you look at number 1, number 3, number 4, even number 5 and 6, where you can't see right now, with all of those, the c term does not have an x. Even the up here where I wrote this, the c term does not have an x. So this one, it's a problem. So if I pull out first a GCF, okay, I'm going to pull out an x. Well, if I start with a trinomial, I need to end with a trinomial. If I pull out an x, I definitely don't have a number GCF because I have 1, 7, and 8. I get x squared minus 7x minus 8. Now, I'm going to draw an arrow down this x because I need to keep it. I don't want to forget about it, and I usually do if I just leave it up where it is. but I need to continue factoring the right side, which is the x squared minus 7x minus 8. So now looking at the x squared minus 7x minus 8, I have an a equals 1 because if you look here, there's nothing in front of that x squared. The x doesn't count because it's been taken out of the problem per se. Okay, so now if I'm looking, now all I'm worried about is this negative 8. And if I find my factors and look at this negative, now I know that I'm only looking at this side, and that is talking about 7 and 2. I'm talking 7s because here's my middle number, right? And because I want a negative 7, I want my 8 to be negative. And again, we talked last week about your sign always following your bigger factor. So my sign is negative, my 7 is negative right here. Okay, this is negative. So my 8 wants to be negative because that's a bigger number between 1 and 8. So now I can go straight to my binomials because I'm a equals 1. So I get x and x. I get plus 1 minus 8. And again, because I have this arrow down, I'm just going to write my answer lower. I have x plus 1, I have x minus 8, and I am done. All right, so now talking about this grouping method, all right? I'm going to pick up right where we left off on the last video. So if you need to, go back and watch, okay? What we do for grouping, first off, we see there's a problem because of this number in front of the x squared, which is our a. So when we see that a is greater than 1, and actually across the board, you can see that right there it is, right there, and right there, we know immediately a is greater than 1 here, here, and here, okay? So we're going to have to group for all of these. So when we do this, okay, in order to group, first we have to take the first by the last, and we have to multiply, keeping in mind that there are signs attached. So we take 3 by negative 8, and we get negative 24. Now, I don't worry about the sign for my factors. Remember, the negative or the positive there tells me if I'm adding or I'm subtracting. So I have 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6, 6 times 4, that's my repeat. And I know I am subtracting because of the negative. So my numbers that I could be working with here are 23, 10, 5, or 2. Hopefully I get one of those. And I got 10. And again, I know I'm working with subtraction because the negative told me that. And I'm working with subtraction, but I want to get a positive 10. So I want negative 2 and positive 12. Okay? Now, what grouping means is that I'm taking this middle term. And I'm splitting it. So I'm splitting it, like I have 10 singles, and I'm splitting it amongst my 2 kids. Now, granted, this is a negative positive situation, so I'm actually like stealing from one kid to give more to the other. It gets a little confusing in that way. So I'm splitting it so that I still have the same amount in the pot, okay? So negative 2x and positive 12x. If I added those up, I would still have positive 10x, okay? Negative 2x plus 12x still equals positive 10x at the end of the day. I bring down the 3x squared I bring down the -8. So now all I've done is I've made two equivalent expressions. The first one and the second one. The first one has 3 terms, the second one has 4. I put parentheses around the first one, or I'm sorry, the first 2 terms, and I put parentheses around the second 2 terms. Okay, and I make my template. I'm pulling out the GCF from the first 2, and I'm pulling out the GCF from the last 2. It does not matter the way your term got split, the middle term. It will all work itself out in the end. And remember, both GCFs need a sign, but it's really important that you have a sign on your second one. So now your GCF, your first GCF, what's most important is that 99% of the time, especially in this class, I can almost say 100% of the time in this class, it will have an X on it. So what you get is an X. Now 3 and 2 do not have a common number. So X times what gets me back to 3x squared? It's going to be 3x. And X times what gets me back to -2x? It's going to be -2. And if you think, it's always 1 less x, right? Now, here, I'm going to lead with the sign, because remember, I told you it's always going to be that sign. That's again, just there's little quirks about this, okay? The one thing is 99% of the time it's going to have that x, and it's always going to be that sign. All right, now I told you that it will be the same parentheses. These have to match. That's going to be true. Looking for a good color, sorry. All right, these have to match. So if those have to match, then what times 3x will get you to 12x? It's going to be 4. Does 4 times -2 get you -8? Yes, it does. Okay, and then your last step is going to be to put together your partners. So these two come together as 3x minus 2. Again, you see it twice, but really it's 1. Okay, and you put together these partners, x plus 4. They're not connected, they want to be. These two kind of revolve around the dating pair. You see the dating pair, it's the 3x minus 2. All right, you see them wherever they go. You're seeing them, okay, wherever they go. And there it is. Your answer is 3x minus 2, x plus 4. All right, let's do number 4. Starting the process over. We take 2 times -14, and we get -28. Remember, the sign only tells us if we're adding or subtracting. So I get my factors. 1 times 28, 2 times 14, 3 doesn't work, 4 times 7, 7 times 4, and that is the repeat, so we're done. The negative tells me I'm subtracting, so I get 27, 12, 3. Looks like I want 3, and I want a -3. So I want 7 to be negative, I want 4 to be positive. So what am I doing with those? I'm splitting my middle term. So I'm going to rewrite the -3x as positive 4x, -7x. And again, does -4x plus, positive 4x minus 7x equal -3x? Yes, it does. I'm going to bring down the 2x squared. I'm going to bring down the -14. I'm going to put parentheses around the first 2 and the last 2. I'm going to set up my template. So GCF, binomial, GCF, binomial. Now, I told you, the first GCF is almost always going to be an x. But here I have a 2 and a 4, so I'm also going to be able to pull out a 2. So 2x times what gets me 2x squared? That's going to be an x. 2x times what gets me back to plus 4x? That's going to be plus 2. Now here's where it is. I told you this, you could always match parenthesis for parenthesis. So I need an x plus 2 here. Okay, because this parenthesis will always match this parenthesis. I also told you that that sign will always come down and be here. The leading sign will always come down. So what negative what times x will get us back to negative 7x? And that answer is negative 7. Negative 7 times x will get me negative 7x. Hopefully, negative 7 times 2 will get me negative 14. And does it? Yes. So now the last thing to do is just to put them together. So I see this pair, x plus 2. I see this. I need to put them together, 2x minus 7. And I'm all done. Let's look at number 5. Twelve times 1 equals positive 12. So I get 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4, and 4 times 3. But that's a repeat, and this is telling me I'm adding. So I get 13, I get 8, I get 7. Well, I'm looking for a 7. So I want this, and it's positive, so I want both of those to be positive. So I'm breaking this down into plus 3x plus 4x. And then I'm bringing down the 12x squared and the plus 1, right? So now I've taken my trinomial, 3 terms, and I've broken it down into 4 terms. I'm going to put my parentheses around the first 2 and the last 2. And I'm going to set my template up. So GCF binomial, GCF binomial. Pulling my GCF out of my first set of parentheses, I know I'm going to have an x. 3 and 12, that's going to be 3. So 3x times what gets me 12x squared? That's going to be 4x. 3x times what gets me 3x? Remember, it can't be nothing. 3x, and I want it to be 3x. I need a placeholder, and that is 1. Right? So then, here, we always lead with that sign. I know this is going to be the same because I told you that. That was the trick I was given. Best trick ever. Okay, this will match this. The 2 sets of parentheses will match. And what times 4x will get me back to 4x? What times 4x will get me back to 4x? Again, if you're saying, well, they're the same, again, you can't multiply by nothing. If you don't want to change something and you're still multiplying it, what do you multiply it by? That's where you multiply it by 1. All right, so 1 times 4x gets you 4x. 1 times 1 gets you 1. So we're good. So now we have this 4x plus 1 that comes down, and we have this 3x plus 1 that comes together. And we're all done. Let's do the last one, number 6. We're going to take 8 times 3. We're going to get positive 24. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6, 6 times 4. There's my duplicate. Positive means we are adding. 25, 14, 11, 10. We want 10. So here's our 10. Now we want negative 10. So we want this negative 4 and this negative 6. They both have to be negative in order to get negative 10. So when we break this up, we're going to write negative 4x minus 6x. They both have to have an x because our middle term has an x. They have to have like terms. So now we bring down the 8x squared and the plus 3. First set of parentheses, second set of parentheses. GCF binomial, GCF binomial. GCF of the first one, we're always in this class at least, going to have the x. And we're going to have a 4, right? Because 4 and 8, our GCF is 4. 4x times what gets us 8x squared? That's going to be a 2x. 4x times what gets us negative 4x? That's going to be negative 1. Now, trick I gave you says that this parenthesis and this parenthesis have to match. So if we got 2x minus 1 over here, we're going to have 2x minus 1 over here. I told you we lead with this, so that's going to be a negative, and negative what times 2x will get us negative 6x. Even if you don't have the sign there, what times 2x will get us negative 6x? It's going to be negative 3, right? And if we check ourselves, negative 3 times negative 1, does that get us positive 3? Yes, it does. So now we pull down, see what we get. The 2x minus 1 comes together. The 4x minus 3 comes together. And we're good to go. All right, so that's grouping. Go practice, practice, practice as much as you can. Practice makes permanent, not perfect. And let me know what questions you have. Again, I'll say it at the end of this video. I said it, at the end of last video. If you were confused at the end of last video, that's okay. If you're confused at the end of this video and it's before Tuesday, that's still okay. If you are confused after we meet live on our Zoom on Tuesday, then you need to make an appointment to see me one-on-one. Don't hit the panic button yet if you still have questions after watching this video or trying it on your own. If you still need help after we meet and we go over this all in person, then we can start to worry a little bit. But give yourself some time. Try to watch these, try to rewatch them, and then we'll kind of reevaluate from there. All right, have a great week, and I will talk to you soon.